this is Killarney, County Kerry. About 3 years ago, there was a rumour that it had been bought by Americans who were going to turn it into a millionaire's playground. We want to find out what truth, if any, there was in that story. Is the Star-Spangled Banner now the national anthem of Killarney or not? First, let's see just where Killarney really is. Right down in the southwesternmost county of Ireland. They call it the Kingdom of Kerry, but it's in the Republic of Ireland. The best place from which to see the lakes is a spot on the road through the mountains to the south called Lady's View. You drive the 10 miles down the winding road from Lady's View into Killarney itself under the steep side of Mangerton Mountain. Through the tunnel, and the lakes again lie on your left, and beyond them the mountains called the McGillicuddy's Reeks. Between the upper and middle lakes is a broad connecting channel called the Long Range. The road winds and twists through the trees under the mountain. At every turn, glimpses of the lakes and the reeks beyond. Then, as you cross the Flesk River flowing into the lower lake, you come into Killarney town. Killarney in Irish, it means the Church of the Sloes. And here, just before the town, are the gates of Killarney House. Whether the Americans bought Killarney or not, one of them, Mr. J. Stuart Robertson from Florida, bought this house. The American and Irish flags now fly side by side over the door. Mr. Robertson bought it in 1956, but last year he sold it again, and 8,000 acres of lake and mountain that went with it. House and estate are now managed by a Killarney solicitor, Mr. Michael Casey. Well, what was this house originally, Mr. Casey?
This house originally was the dwelling of the Kenmare family, the Earls of Kenmare.
Mm-hmm. Lord Castleross's family?
Lord Castleross was the 6th Earl of Kenmare, actually.
Mm. And this is the house that was bought by the Americans?
Yes, it is.
And who owns it now?
It's now owned by a group of 14 Americans. They come from various states in America: Florida, Cleveland, Philadelphia, etc.
And the man who first entered into the deal has had nothing to do with it any longer?
No, he's left the deal now completely, and he's no further interest in it.
Have they made many alterations to the house since they bought it?
No, very little has been done, actually, because there is not... They didn't like to destroy the old atmosphere of the house. The only thing that will be renovated is the chapel in the place there. They've got the privilege of saying Mass in the private chapel in the house.
Well, what plans have they got for the future to develop it? Are they going to build anything else? Or?
Well, the house itself will probably be renovated. They intend to put up swimming pools. They intend to put up pavilions and other amenities that the people will ask for, and that will be a help to Killarney.
What do the people of Killarney think about it?
It's hard to say. You meet some people, they seem quite delighted with them. Others are doubtful, they want to see things moving. Mm-hmm. I think the Killarney people are waiting to see him, though.
Mr. Casey, let us have a look inside. 2 guests of the syndicate were staying there, a Mr. and Mrs. Griffiths from Boston. When Mr. Stuart Robertson bought the property, there were reports that he was going to turn it into a colony of rich Americans. What sort of man is he? Well, while we were in Killarney, we had a piece of good fortune because Mr. Stuart Robertson turned up, and here he is. Now, Mr. Robertson, is it true that you are the man who bought Killarney?
Yes, Mr. Barry, I bought Killarney in August 1956.
Exactly what you mean when you say you bought Killarney?
Well, I bought a portion of the Kenmare estate.
And what did you plan to do with it when you bought it?
Well, my plan was to create a club in which Americans of prominence would have a headquarters and come to Ireland during the summer months.
Irish Americans?
Largely Irish Americans, but they didn't necessarily have to be Irish Americans.
Have you any further interest in this place?
No, I have no further interest in Killarney.
Do you believe that the way it's now turned out is the way you planned for it?
Well, not quite, but it is a vehicle that is attracting prominent Americans to Ireland who otherwise would not come to the Emerald Isle.
Now, when you first bought this place, it was reported that you were going to turn it into a millionaire's playground, an Irish Las Vegas. Was this true?
No, I think that's more or less the philosophy of the Irish newspapers, that every American is a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
My friends do not need to be...
May I ask you if you're a millionaire?
Only in the newspapers, not in the bank.
Well, now you have nothing more to do with Killarney House, Killarney Estate. I understand you bought another property in Ireland.
Yes, in December of last year I bought Old Connaught Hall, near Bray.
And are you going to sell this new property that you bought the way you sold the one here?
Well, only time can tell. At the present moment I am negotiating for another large property in Ireland to tie in with the other operation.
So you're a real estate man?
Real estate now.
And was what happened here in Killarney just a real estate operation?
No, it was based upon a sincere love of Ireland.
Well, well. There's another charming house overlooking the biggest of the three lakes, only a couple of miles away. The house with this splendid view is owned by the lady who sold Killarney House and part of the estate to Mr. Robertson. She's Mrs. Beatrice Grosvenor, niece of the last Earl of Kenmare.
I must say, this is a very attractive house indeed, Mrs. Grosvenor.
I'm glad you like it.
Have you been living in it long?
No, it was only completed 18 months ago. It's only just really finished.
Oh, you had it built then when you sold the present Killarney
Yes,
house?
that's right. When we left Killarney House, the time of the sale, we had this house was built then after directly.
Well, had Killarney House been your family's home for many years?
No, not really awfully long, because they only moved in there in 1916, which is not all that long ago.
Where did they live before that?
Well, before that, they lived here on the site of this house. You see, my great-grandparents built a house here about 1870, and that was here really a very short time. It was destroyed by fire accidentally in 1912. And then it was that my grandparents went down the hill and converted what were some stables down there into a house which was then known as Kenmare House and later became Killarney House, and that is what I sold to the Americans.
Ah.
And so we really came back home onto the hill when this house was built.
You still own the upper lake and quite a lot of the land around here.
Yes, that's quite true. Yes, we've still got a very big acreage here in County Kerry.
And what do you do with it?
Well, we're trying to run it as a sort of farm, modern farm and estate. I'm living here the whole time, so the days of the absentee landlord is over in Ireland.
Anyway, you're actually on the spot and
Yeah,
running the place.
Oh, rather, yes.
So we can finally dispose of the story that you sold Killarney.
Oh, I think we can, yes. I think that's not quite true.
But there are Americans in Killarney, tourists, plenty of them. Outside any of the hotels at 10 in the morning, you'll see them setting off for the trip through the Gap of Dunloe. Visitors, UK as well as US, and even a lot of Irish people, call these vehicles jaunting cars, but their proper name is sidecars, for an obvious reason. The sidecar has one big advantage for tourists. Instead of being forced to concentrate on the back of the driver's neck, you get a splendid view of the countryside. Along the northern edge of the lower lake and across the River Lawn, through which all the lakes flow out into the Atlantic, that's the route to the Gap of Dunloe. The first stop is Kate Carney's cottage. Miss Carney is no longer in residence, but the present owner is fully licensed. Here you leave the sidecars. The rest of the journey through the Gap has to be done on ponies, because the road is so rough. The Gap is a deep cleft through the mountains from the northwest corner of the lower lake to the head of the upper lake. And having gone through it on horseback, you come back to Killarney by boat through the three lakes. Usually, part of the thrill is shooting the rapids at the meeting of the waters, between the upper and lower lakes. But in this dry summer, even Killarney's lakes are low, and there wasn't enough water for shooting the rapids. Under Brechin Bridge, between the middle and lower lakes, we nearly went aground in the shallow channel. The boatmen pointed out some rocks, which he'd always known were there, but had never seen before this dry year. The book says the lower lake has 30 islands. I didn't count them. But one of the largest is Ross Island, and by it, Ross Castle. The last castle in Ireland to fall to Cromwell, and now, if not US territory, at least it's American property, because it's on the part of the estate that Mrs. Grosvenor sold. There, the sidecars are waiting to take the weary tourists back into town after their long trip. A lot of the Killarney people get their living from tourism as drivers, boatmen or such like, but not all of them. I wanted to hear a bit more about what they thought of the Americans, so I had a word with Matty Gleeson, a retired fisherman on the Kenmare estate.
How long have you been working for Mrs. Grosvenor's family, Mr. Gleeson?
Well, roughly between 43 and 44 years.
Well, tell me now, is it true that Mrs. Grosvenor sold Killarney to the Americans?
No, certainly not.
Well, what happened exactly?
Mrs. Grosvenor sold just a small portion of the family estate that she had inherited. Just a small portion of it.
And that's owned now by this group of Americans?
And that's owned by the group of Americans.
Well, now, how did this story get around that the Americans had bought Killarney, that Mrs. Grosvenor had sold it?
Well, the whole thing appeared to the majority of people in Killarney to be a very ridiculous thing from start to finish.
Why was that?
Because they knew perfectly well that Killarney wasn't sold at all.
Well, what did they think of the idea of Killarney being sold?
Well, their opinion, of course, was sort of mixed.
Yeah. Did some of them welcome the idea?
Yes.
They welcomed the Americans coming?
They did, of course.
Why?
Because they look forward to, well, dollars flying everywhere.
And do the dollars fly everywhere?
No, certainly not.
Well, let's have a look at the town and see if there are any dollars flying anywhere. There's not much of a Middle West look about the main street. Or is there? Of course, it's fair day, market day to you, so the dollars should be flying if they're only here. No dollars? No sheriff. At a guess, I'd say the Americans were rather like the old landlords, conspicuous by their absence. If anyone has a little Yankee leprechaun at the bottom of his garden, guarding a pot of fairy dollars, nobody's going to admit it. As Michael Casey put it, I think the Killarney people are just waiting to see about it. Well, there you are. It seems that the Americans haven't bought Killarney, and the national anthem in this part of the world is still the soldier's song. Good night.